5-gallon mylar bags are really kind of a nuisance more than anything. I can kind of show you how the process goes. Um, once you open up the bag and you get it inside, and you fill it, you have to bring it up and roll it and flatten it out. But you have to use an iron and a 2x4 to get a good solid seal on to where it's going to flatten out. And I wish I had one because this is kind of, talking through it just isn't like show.
And the mylar bags are, when you heat them, they'll seal themselves?
They seal themselves. They make different widths of actual mylar bag sealers. I know Martin has one. The Yotir's 12-inch,
Yeah.
something like that. They're kind of handy. I've never purchased one. I started out using a iron and a flat iron, and it just kind of stuck with it. If at any point you have questions, just go to me.
In mylar bags, you have to have food safe buckets. Okay.
Do not. Although actually trying to find these buckets anymore that aren't food safe is more difficult to find anymore.
Really? Okay.
They're almost all of them are food safe. Real quick, material that you use, and that's a good question about the food safe buckets. I do some of my long-term storage just straight into a bucket. Anything that's bulk, like
I'm trying.
corn in
Sure,
particular,
I'm just changing.
some wheat.
More
I
you
just go
talk to
straight
me like
into the
that, the more
bucket.
it's going to get disturbed.
Rice, I actually use mylar bags. The reason is because I don't plan on breaking that much of it out at a time. I do it in about 8-pound increments with rice.
Because I've got a lot of rice.
I was gonna say, the 1-pound mylar bags actually work really good, and you can get 3 of them, 3 1-gallon mylar bags into a 5-gallon bucket with rice, and then you have a little bit of space at the top. But they become manageable at that point, so the bucket's only about 25 pounds each,
Yeah.
versus like a 50-pound bag of rice or something like that. But the nice thing about doing them in 8-pound increments is that you're not breaking in. 8 pounds of rice goes a long
I know.
ways.
I'm fine.
So, I mean, if you're trying to get into, if you had this bucket full, you'd probably be looking at about 30 pounds. And once you crack the seal on it, now you've got 30 pounds of rice that you're going to either need to reseal or consume in a reasonable amount of time, and try to keep bugs and stuff like that out.
Do you ever use any kind of an herb to keep your bugs out? I was
Dry
bay
ice,
leaf.
dry
Bay
ice,
leaf.
dry ice. I was gonna say dry ice kills the bugs, that it was.
Bay leaf keeps them out.
Well, I had this rice dumped, free rice in a bucket like that. And it was just, it was on no bags or nothing, but you put dry ice in it and seal it, and it kills all the bugs.
I was gonna say, once you put oxygen absorbers in it and take the oxygen out, you take out the bugs aren't going to hatch out. And the other thing, I was gonna say, most wheat flour, most of it has bug eggs in it already. There's a certain amount that by that's considered an acceptable standard by food processing and stuff like that. On the buckets, 5-gallon buckets, they make 6-gallon buckets as well. I think they make some shorter ones now that are like 2.5. I've just found that the nice thing with the 5-gallon buckets, if you want to get real creative, you can use different colored buckets for different stuff that you're putting in. It was just purely accident that I started putting all my corn in yellow buckets. But I just stuck with it. The other thing is, plain white buckets right now, the price on them has gone up exponentially in the last year. The ones that are just plain with no advertising for businesses or anything like that. I want to say they're running right at about $9 a bucket, and the lids have gone up just the same. A lot of it has to do with these things are produced from plastic and petroleum, which anything is, paying is expensive. However, if you're not opposed to advertising for other companies, these buckets are about half the price. You usually look in somewhere between $3 and $5 a bucket, depending on where you're buying it from. The cool
And how
thing.
about using a bucket like we use they use cat litter. So we got a cat who got a cat litter buckets, and I've got plants and all that.
If you're using mylar bags, I don't know why not. All the bucket does is protect the mylar bag really and make it easy to move it around. I've seen people that'll use totes and put stuff in totes. Here's my only problem with using totes is that you can make those things super, super heavy without even realizing how fast you're filling them up. The other problem that you have is they're not as easy to maneuver. They stack nicely. The square buckets do too. They stack nicely. These round ones, there's a little more dead space. They don't tighten up quite as much. You can still get quite a bit in them. But where I was going is, Menards has green buckets, Lowe's has blue, Home Depot has orange. If you go out to Atwood's, they have every color imaginable. They have pink, burgundy, green. They have more bucket colors than you can shake a stick at. I think they have blue too. So if you want to get creative and say, okay, I'm going to put all corn in yellow, all rice in blue, all wheat, so you can color code what you have so you can see it at a glance, you can do that. Or you just put labels on them.
That's what I do. I have all white ones, so I just put.
So that's now lids is a whole different animal.
My phone.
You have lids that don't have seals in them and they're reusable. If you're using mylar bags, these are more than adequate to use because all you're doing is just sealing it up to keep rodents out more than anything. These lids are fairly inexpensive. They run about $3 a pop for these. If you're putting stuff if you're directly storing in a 5-gallon bucket and you're going to put the oxygen absorber in, then you're going to have to use a bucket that has a built-in seal in it. These are running about $7 a piece right now. So you can, between the bucket and the lid, you have about somewhere almost, depending on where you're getting your buckets and lids, anywhere from about a $10 to $15 investment just in this. And then the mylar bags and whatever goes inside of it. The other option on lids are gamma lids. And gamma lids have
the metallic looking pretty rooms. That's mylar.
where once you put the lid on, you can thread this on and off so you can get stuff in and out easily. The only thing you have to keep in mind is if you're doing 1-gallon bags and putting them in here, they don't come back through very easily. So once you take this off, trying to get them to come out sometimes isn't quite that easy. It depends on how loose the pack they are. Rice is one of the ones where I'll use this type of lid usually. And the reason I like these versus this is once these things go on, they're on. You don't have to worry about them popping off without you expecting it.
That's right, because we have a raccoon that comes tries to get into we have one of the cat food. I use that, and he can't get that thing off.
Right.
Off of the cat food. I can't. I just barely get it off.
There's actually
Well, you should get that.
I left a pile of stuff at home that I meant to bring with me. There's actually a tool for popping the lids on these. But the gamma lids, if you have, I use 1-gallon bags almost all the time. There's only a few things that I package in quart bags. Powdered milk, I put in quart bags. I do some rice in quart bags because
Where do you find those bags at? I've never seen what you're talking about.
quart bags.
Yes, I don't know anything about where you get them at.
I order them online. I don't think there's any place locally to purchase them.
Mylar bags.
On the mylar bags. The quart bags probably, I think they're about that big. They're fairly
But you have to. But you call them Milo bags.
mylar.
Mylar, that's the
And
material
mylar.
they're made of.
That's what they're made from.
What's the
That-
life expectancy of the mylar bag?
What's it?
25, 30
Long
years.
time.
I mean, I guess it'll last longer. The bag should probably outlast
What do you do? You
whatever's
put
inside.
your milk in that bag. You dump the whole milk. You dump the powdered milk in the bag itself.
Yeah, I measure it out because what I do is I measure it for the amount that we would be making at that time. So if I
Does
usually
that powdered milk get old?
once you seal it in mylar, it'll last forever.
Once you buy it, transfer it over to that.
It's just like rice or beans. It'll last, like 10 years.
Really?
And Ken, there's nothing about the bag that's going to deteriorate into
No.
the food?
No, mylar bags, no. Depends on who you talk to. There's some people that say I brought this because I did this one day just for fun, I guess. But I put rice inside a jar. and I think there's no oxygen absorber in this one. You can store long term. You can store rice in glass or beans or anything else. The problem with mason jars is they get extremely heavy, and they're not really that easy for moving around. Now, that being said, we do meal in a jar, where you can put rice, beans, lentils, whatever you want, and you kind of layer it up through here. It looks kind of cool, and then you come home, you spin the top off, drop it in, or the night before, you drop it in the Instapot, and you let it simmer all day. You come home and you got dinner cooked, and it's already pre-packed. There's a couple books out there that are called Meals in a Jar, different stuff like that. So that's, and you can throw oxygen absorbers in those and they'll last forever as well. We go through them so fast though, I mean, we'll probably do 20 or 30 a year and we rotate through what we've been putting in. We very rarely use oxygen absorbers, which is another thing. Prep what you're going to eat what you prep. If you're not a bean eater, don't buy beans. Because then you're just going to have tons of stuff that you're never going to eat, or if you don't like it. If you don't like lentils, don't buy lentils. But if there's something that you do like, buy that. I'm real specific about the rice I buy. I only buy jasmine, just because I like it better.
Where do you find that?
Sam's. You can buy in 25-pound bags at Sam's.
Well, yeah, we have a Sam's.
But yeah, they sell in 25-pound bags. That's as big as you can get, I believe. At Sam's is 25. You can get long grain white rice in 50-pound bags. But for bulk, buying in bulk, Sam's, Costco, any place like that works out really well. If you want to travel a little bit, you can go down to the LDS Canning Center down in Oklahoma City. They used to allow you to go down there and you could put stuff in 10-pound or number 10 cans, and then now use their facilities and actually put the stuff in cans anymore. But you can buy dehydrated or freeze-dried carrots, peas, almost anything you could imagine. And if you ever go out on the LDS website, I think it's called LDS Preparedness. And they have a ton of great information. They actually have a whole book. It's like 190 some pages, and I downloaded the PDF file for it and have it because it has a bunch of really good information in it. And I think this is actually from USA Emergency Supply. And what this is it tells you what size oxygen absorbers you should use, in what size containers, and what type of material or what you're using it in. So the tighter if you have something that's really loose and has a lot of air around it, you're going to need to use a bigger oxygen absorber. Suppose you use rice versus beans. Beans has a lot more air around it than rice. Rice is a lot more dense. So you can use a smaller oxygen absorber in rice than you can beans. However, that all being said, I stuck with two sizes, and that way I don't have to guess what they are. I use nothing but 500s and 2500s. So 500s, when you purchase them, they come in, I think I buy like 50 at a time. But they come in individual 10-pound packaging, I want to say. So you get them like this. And so these are vacuum packed. Once you cut these open, you have to be ready to use them. So what I end up doing is I have a jar. So almost inevitably, I'll have 2 or 3 left over. I'll throw them inside the jar, shut the lid on it, and then they just seal themselves.
What is it that you got in your hand?
Those are the oxygen absorbers. Those are 500 cc oxygen absorbers. So you put these in I'll show you how they work in a minute when I put them in, because I'm actually going to do a couple things. But these are 500 cc's. It's a pack of 100, and I think I paid like $19 or $20 for 100 of these, and that goes a long way. The
Where
20,
do you find them at?
huh?
Where do you find them at? Online?
Online. I buy almost everything through Amazon right now. There's nothing locally where they sell this kind of stuff, unfortunately. The 2500s come in packs of 5, and I want to say last time I bought them, I got 25, and it was about $20 for 20 or 25 of them, and I got 5 packs like this. The nice thing is I don't do a whole lot of bulk packing right now. I've kind of slowed down on that. Corn though, and the reason I I bulk pack a lot of corn, especially chopped corn, because if you mill it down and you're making corn flour, it's real easy if it's already chopped, because this stuff is chopped with screen. But I also have chickens, so if push comes to shove, I also have chicken food, which is another protein source.
And where did you get your chunk?
Atwoods.
Atwood?
Yeah, it's $13 for a 40-pound bag.
What do you do with that? Besides feeding it to the chickens, what else?
You can mill it and make if you have a hand cranking mill, you can mill down flour, wheat flour, corn flour. Basically, you can grind anything you want. You can grind coffee if you're so inclined. Getting a good mill though is imperative. It's kind of like having a can opener. If you have a whole bunch of cans of food and no can opener, it doesn't do you any good. Same with this kind of stuff. If you have a whole bunch of corn, you don't have any way of grinding it, and it's kind of a nuisance. Dead corn or feed corn, humans can also consume it. The difference between what they package for human consumption and animal consumption is how many times they wash it. They don't wash it as many times for animal consumption. So if you're willing to wash it a few more times, you can use feed corn or dead corn, field corn. It has about a bajillion names, but you can eat that as well. This is actually packaged as feed corn for animals, but it is fit for human consumption. You just have to wash it. It's a little bit dirtier. Once again, it's one of those kind of deals where for bulk, I mean, like I said, we ground it down and made corn flour out of it before, and then made tortillas just to see what the process was really like. I'll tell you what, it's tough. It's an all-day deal.
It's what?
It's an all-day deal making tortillas. But
How do they taste?
good. Great. I like
it. How do they taste? They taste different.
No, just like any other corn tortilla. We just did them ourselves. So the buckets are, like I said, it's whatever color you want to use. Food grade's not important if you're using mylar bags. If you are using mylar bags and you go in direct storage, food grade is required. And they're stamped and say food grade on the bottom of them. But like I was saying at the beginning, it's almost harder to find non-food grade than food grade. I mean, they're just, food grade's more readily available. Yes.
I have a lid question. I got some of the Gamma Seal lids, and I put them on the buckets, but the frame on a couple of them will turn. Does that mean it's not sealed?
Yep.
Okay.
And
Oh.
this is what you want.
I did that, but they still, there's two of them that still turn.
I was gonna say the thing with gamma lids is you're not doing, you shouldn't be doing direct storage with gamma lids anyway. Usually you're gonna use because as soon as you break the seal, you have oxygen in and out. So you're really not taking oxygen out for long term. With a gamma lid, as long as they're not popping off, you're okay. Because really, the gamma lid is just making it more accessible to get stuff in and out. So if you have stuff in smaller packages, you can take it out at will without having to pry the top off every single time and put it back down. Stuff, like I said, we have some things that we have in with gamma lids. We have some that we use these. I pulled all of these back off of all my buckets and gone to strictly using this style, just because we found out that the ones without the seal pop off too easily when we move them around. So we got away from using those, strictly using gamma lids. And it's more of a, and this is really a convenience item. But they're kind of cool to have if you're in and out of stuff all the time. Like I said, we do some rice in smaller packages. I eat a lot of rice. We pop when we can get, we take them out of the pork mylar bags, and then we can rotate the whatever it is that we have in there. So we know what the date is, and then once the bucket's empty, we do a whole other batch of the same thing.
Can you use your mylar bags for the one time?
Yes, yes, you can. And I'll show you that here in just a few minutes. If you're going to if you're going to use it and go back to long-term storage, you're going to have to put another oxygen absorber in it and reheat seal it again. if you're just going to open it and then want to, like, okay, Mylar bags come in a couple different varieties. These are the ones that I really like because they have this bottom that opens up. Some of them don't. So these will stand on their own once you open them up. And they're not that much more expensive. So once you open these, you can stand them up when you're filling them, and they fill a whole lot easier. The ones that don't open at the bottom like that, they tip and fall. You have to have something set up or somebody standing there holding it for you while you try to pour stuff into it. These also have a Ziploc. So if you seal just across this top, but you almost have to use a sealer like Martin has that will just make a very thin line on them. Because once you take a pair of scissors and cut across it, you can see there's a notch right there, a tear notch. So you seal it across the top, and then once you cut into it, it has a Ziploc after that. So then it's just like a regular bag, and you can get stuff in and out. I heat seal mine all the way down. I can still use the Ziploc if I want, but we're not really set up that way. These just, I like the bottom. The top was just kind of, when we bought it, I think we bought like 100 of these at a pop one time. We got a good deal on them. And they just were all Ziploc at the top. That really is not that important to me to have a Ziploc top, because once I get into it, we're going to put it in a Tupperware. So we have a Tupperware container that we pour everything into once we open it, and then we eat from that. Or once we start preparing those, we prepare from that, not usually directly from mylar. So we take everything out of the mylar and put it into other containers once we're going to use it. We use the mylar just for the long-term storage capability that it has, where the bag's not going to deteriorate. It doesn't allow sunlight to come in. When you're purchasing mylar bags, they come in different weights or thicknesses. And I want to say these are 10 mil, I think. It makes some that are a little thinner. It makes some that are really thin. I want to say there's some that are like 3 or 5. You have to be kind of leery when you get those, because it's kind of like if you ever buy sheet plastic here's one, trash bags. If you ever look at, you get like those black trash bags for picking up leaves, the ones that say 1 mil on them, and you put 2 handfuls of leaves and they tear apart as you're trying to carry it off somewhere. You want the ones that say 7 mil on them, because 7 mil, they don't tear. You can shove sticks and stuff in them and they don't tear. Mylar is the exact same thing. If you get to where it's too thin, then you stand a chance of them tearing when you're packaging, moving them. You can tear them easier. Although I've never actually had a big issue with that. I just gone with the heavier mylar bags, just knowing that they're going to be more durable. And the cost difference is nominal to go from the thinner ones to the heavier ones. When you really start thinking about the overall cost, if a couple cents is going to break the bank, then you can go with lighter, but it's kind of like using these lids and heavier bags. It's just peace of mind long term for us, knowing that we're not going to pop the lids off. We know that the bags are stronger. Sunlight's not really a big issue. You can store stuff just in mylar on a shelf if you wanted to, because it's not going to let sunlight in, and that's part of the long-term storage process. You want to keep it somewhere where it's cool, dry, and no light. Those are all things that cause food to break down. I was going to make a comment earlier about when I was talking about other things to store food in, and asking about the plastic buckets and stuff like that. Pop bottles. People talk about putting rice, beans, and stuff like that in pop bottles. And it is food safe, but there's I've heard 2 different stories. One says that pop bottles, the bottle starts breaking down and will leach contents into the food. And I've also been told that that's hooey, that's not true. That's not, my bigger concern is, I don't know, if you want to have fun sometimes, fill a bottle up with rice and then try to get it back out again. I mean, that and beans both. If you have a bunch of time on your hands, it'd be, it's okay, because you sit there and shake it and it doesn't come out. But I mean, pop ball. That's the reason I don't like. I'm trying to get anything back out of them. It's a nuisance. Irregardless, they're also kind of odd shaped. But if it's the only thing you have to work with, use it. Like I said, there's as many different ways for long-term storage as there are people out there.
And I want to ask you, see, right now, I've got a whole bunch of buckets like that, but I just bought the rice in its own buckets and stack them in there. So that doesn't do any good or anything. You've got to get the rice out of their bags and put it into those bags.
Yes, or into something that you can take the oxygen out of. And that's what the oxygen absorbers are for.
I've got my beans and everything in that, but they're in their own bag. They're not, I did not transfer them or anything.
No, and I was going to say, and they don't have enough.
Can I go help him?
That's what happened. So what I should have done, my rice in a bucket like that.
You can.
Take all the rice out of there and just put it in the bucket and then. But how are you going to use it? How you if you have to open it up, you have to use the rice.
That's what I was saying earlier. That the only reason you would want to
You have to keep resealing it, but more.
right,
Something
or you're going to have to use a whole bunch of food all at one time.
Or you'd have to just buy a whole bunch of those things, right? Put all your food in them things right there.
You can. Like I said, what I was saying at the beginning, you can package food in a couple different ways. You can do bulk, where, like this, doing it straight into the bucket.
I know, but like I said, if you just want to take a few, just let it out.
If
You can put it in small mylar bags, a whole bunch of small mylar bags.
And then get the bags in the back.
if you are looking for something that you're not going to have to get in and out of a whole lot, then mylar is the way to go.
So you use that whole, when you put that stuff in there, then you put the whole thing at once, right?
This I do. I plan on, when you start milling this much stuff down, be surprised at how fast it loses its volume. And this much corn milled down doesn't make as much flour as you would think. It's not the same volume.
Yeah, it takes more of that to make flour.
You know,
It makes more.
so, and like I said, we go with, I like corn, like I said, because it doubles as chicken feed. That's really the simple, almost like I knew 3 buckets, will 2 bags will do 3 buckets. So we have everything straight into the bucket. This is, once we have it in the bucket, this has an airtight seal on it because these things are trying to absorb oxygen already. Throw them on the top.
Just throw it on the top. You don't have to stick it in there. I mean, you don't have to just,
And we're done.
Yeah, because one of those probably won't. Yeah. The whole.
Now, I'm going to show you, like I said, it seems like every time I get in to start doing this kind of stuff, I'm going to have more oxygen absorbers left over. And once they're open to the air, they're going to try to work. So by putting them in a mason jar, it saves them. So that you're not worried about.
Cost too much money. It's just thrown away.
That's 80 pounds of corn. Quick. So that's how you go directly into the bucket. You have a little bit of working time from the time you open up the oxygen absorbers, but you want to be moving along relatively quickly. What I typically do is I'll get everything in the bags and labeled, and then I'll have them open, and then I do like in batches of 3 or 4. So I'll put 3 of them in, and I start sealing the tops. Because what that ends up doing is it gives me a little bit of working time where I can do those 3, and I get them into the buckets, and then I do the next batch of 3 or 4, and I get those into the buckets. Like I said, I know that 3 1-gallon mylar bags will fit perfectly into a 5-gallon bucket. Now, when you first put them in, they're still soft and they move around and stuff. But as the oxygen is sucked out of them, they will all form together. So they want to come out as a block when it's all said and done. That's why I was saying these gamma lids don't work. The gamma lids don't work really well for that in particular, because I know that the wheat and rice that we have that's in 1-gallon mylar bags. Once you take the lid off, you take it upside down and shake all 3 bags out at one time. These gamma lids have enough of a lip on them on the inside that it keeps them from wanting to come out easily. And that's just kind of but on smaller batches of stuff, example, we usually do 2 pounds of pasta in a bag. And then we put them in 1-gallon bags. We put the pasta, and then what we do is we roll it down to fit the 2, and then we seal it. So those are small enough. I want to say we can get like 5 or 6 of those bags, maybe 6, into a 5-gallon bucket. But those are small enough that there's enough maneuvering room where we can use gamma lids and take them out. So once we break into a 2-pound thing of pasta, then
How many of those bags, if you had to get a 7-year supply or something, how many of those buckets would you need for 7-year supply?
I was going to say, really good question, actually. There's several different references that you can get online, and they all say pretty much the same thing. Some of them are way more detailed than others, but I want to say that and it varies based on age, weight, age and sex will change the amount of calories that you need to consume in a day. So then you start doing math after that if you want to get real technical about it. So you're going to say, okay, I'm 60 years old, male, I'm going to burn about 2,500 calories a day in a working environment. So I need to eat 2,500 calories a day. Well, how much corn am I going to need? Or, if I make this food, how calorie dense is it? So we're looking at meal preparation on top of that. So whatever you're prepping, you need to keep in mind that most long-term stuff is just a base. And also that your long-term storage should probably be about a year to maybe 2 if you're really pushing hard on the outside, because where you should really be looking to go is to sustainable food, where you're either growing, making, raising your own food. You shouldn't be relying on something that's in storage to last you forever, because it's not. You have to get to renewable food sources and be gardening, like I said. And if you haven't gardened, trust me, it's not a skill set that you learn in a year. It takes a few. I was going to say, to crack the nut on what it takes.
But you got to get the right seeds. If you got the sterilized seeds, they ain't going to do you any good.
Yeah, I was going to say, but there's a lot involved in that as well. So really, your long-term food storage should be getting you through the first winter, is how I've always looked at it, is that I want to push through the first winter and get into a growing period. So I know I have to get past my first growing period, and hopefully I have enough food to sustain me through that period, and then a little bit more for that first grow, and then whatever we have at the end of it is renewable. We do have chickens. We live smack dab in the middle of Wichita too. Worst place in the world to live. I live in Yuppie Central. I am so. You were talking about Antifa earlier. I have somebody less than a block away from me that proudly flies their Antifa flag.
Really?
I've got pictures of it. I have more gay pride, Antifa, anything that you can think of that is ultra liberal is in my neighborhood. But I have proven that I can live amongst them, and they have no idea. But once you should be thinking, okay, I need to get this far. Now, if you don't want to do the math, there are some publications out there. LDS preparedness is huge. U.S. Emergency Supplies has a lot of good information. There's several of them out there, and some of them have calculators and stuff like that. Some of them just say you need this much. So for the average person, you're going to need 70 pounds of sugar.
Just look at it and send it down.
I want to say it was like 140 pounds of beans, lentils, or anything in that line. And then grains, you need 400 pounds of grains, okay? That's for a person, and that's just base. Those are, I suppose you could survive on plain rice and beans if you really wanted, but it would be a miserable existence.
I'm gonna order this book. It's a woman. She's a scientist and stuff. It's a book about how all the grasses, the flowers, the barks of the trees and stuff that can sustain you and keep you alive. And colored pictures in the book, because you've got to have colored pictures so you won't get poisoned or something, of what flowers and stuff, and it's a book that for everybody to have in case they can't get this or they run out or something and go out.
I was gonna say,
dandelion or whatever it is.
I was gonna say,
I want to get that book because I think survival people should have that book.
What's the name of it?
There's a lot of good
I can tell you right off
information.
there.
There's a lot of good information out there about wild edibles and stuff.
Because I used to pull a certain weed and love it, and I used to eat it all the time, and I'm still here. So.
There's
I bet it's that book right
I mean, you have to be able to use multiple.
No, this is a small book.
You have to be able to use multiple sources for food, be it stored food, growing food, raising food, or natural edible, or stuff that's just natural that's in our
But
environment.
these are going in the air to keep things from growing.
You store salt?
I do, and actually, salt is critical. Salt is super critical. But when you store salt, salt and sugar both, you can store it in its original containers, and it'll last an eternity. It might get hard; you might have to break it up, but you don't have to.
I
one's
buy
gotta
them at Sam's in the square box. And you say I can store them in that, I don't have to put them in a bucket?
Nope. I mean, you can put. I would put the salt into a bucket, but you don't have to take it out of its original packaging. Same with sugar. It doesn't have to come out of its original packaging. When I store sugar, though, I take a bag of rice, just a 1 pound bag of rice, I take a fork and shove a couple holes in the top of it and drop it in on the top. Rice is a natural oxygen absorber.
How about honey?
Honey will last indefinitely as well, as long as it's in glass. 100% maple syrup. Your sugars are honey in glass, 100% maple syrup in glass, and any sugars. Be real mindful about brown sugar. Brown sugar has a lot of oils in it and does not store very long. It'll only store for about 2 years, and then it can go rancid. Same with brown rice. Brown rice can go rancid as well after a couple years because it has oil in it, and the oil is the part that makes it right. So you have to be able to be mindful of everything that like I said, the corn, the rice, the beans. They're all base. You know, you're going to get some calories out of it, but there's other stuff that you're going to have to go along with that. We pack, like I said, pasta, potatoes.
Potatoes. My favorite.
Yeah.
Potatoes. If you get potatoes, don't get anything that has butter in it already. or like scallop potatoes that are already all seasoned up and everything, because they will go rancid in about a year.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter what you package them in, they're
When
going
you
to go
get bugs in
bad.
that box, so you take them out of there?
Yes, we'll take these out. And I'll show you real quick.
Everything's put just in a box or in a bag, or that take out and put it? I have to order those bags. Yeah, I'll have to get some, yeah. See, mine has a thing for the fridge, the building stuff.
Here's the other secret with mylar bags. You write on them before you put anything in them.
Oh, yeah. So you'll know what's in
That's
it.
good advice.
Yep.
But it's too hard to write on them once the food's in there.
I know it. Oh, well, that's definitely, yeah.
Just a comment on the salt and sugar. I heard that if you use the little oxygen absorber packets
You
in
can't.
your salt or sugar,
Do
it'll
not.
turn them into a brick.
Yes.
And you'll have to use like a cheese grater to grate your salt or sugar back down to usable form.
That is,
So-
yeah, do not use oxygen absorbers in salt or sugar. Like I said, I put rice up of the sugar and just poke a couple holes in the bag because we put it in 5-gallon buckets, and because rice will take some moisture out just naturally without sucking everything out of it. Okay,
That's the one
So,
she just
just-
bought that she wanted you to see. Oh, okay.
real simply, on the bag, all I did was put potatoes, and then what the weight is, and the date that I'm packaging it. So then, what we're going to do.
Wait just a moment to seal that till she gets back, because
You want an oxygen absorber in there too, don't you?
Smaller.
Okay, so you poured all of the potatoes into the bag.
So now, what we're gonna do is we're gonna take like I said, I stuck with the 500cc oxygen absorbers. Throw one in there. Put the remainders. And this tab right there that comes with them. As soon as it turns blue, it lets you know that your oxygen absorbers are bad. So if you buy some, and that thing is turning blue right now, that lets you know that these that came out were still good. I stuck one in here. I stick them down towards the bottom a little bit. Push out as much air as you can. Hit the Ziploc bag. Put the Ziploc on it. And for the guys here, if your wife has a high-end curling iron, I do not recommend using it.
Oh, that's how you seal it. Oh, what an accurate
Straight.
seal that.
That's clever.
No power?
No.
Okay, no problem.
Somewhere.
Oh, plug it in
To a different plug-in. There's a plug-in up above.
Here, what about now?
Oh, that's on.
Um,
Wait for it to warm up
Jiggle
and
it.
pull that oxygen absorber out.
Those are two things I need.
Okay, so I have to repackage my potatoes.
This one will be bad. This is one back up again. So we'll go ahead. I'll show you how to cut them down and then we'll blow them up. I brought pasta as well. These are just some of the many things that.
But that's mainly what I want to do by that.
These are in 1 pound boxes.
Yeah.
But this is what we found out with pasta. That for long-term storage, if you waste 1 pound of pasta is more than a quart bag, but way less than a 1 gallon bag. If you use two pounds of pasta in a 1 gallon bag, it makes more use of the bag and you're not wasting as much. Like I said, we'll take our stuff out of long-term storage as we rotate it, and we'll cut into it. But 2 pounds, once we put it into another storage container, 2 pounds for us is, we can eat on it for several weeks. because we don't eat a whole lot of pasta at one time. So that's why we go 2 pounds, because it's just more economical with the bags and how once we start using it, that we don't use it from the mylar bag, and we're not planning on using all of it at once. So we're going to put 2 pounds into a bag, and then we go that way. But we found that once we're into using pasta, we're not huge pasta eaters, but I like it periodically. I like pasta salad. So once we have it in there, like I said, 2 pounds will last us a couple weeks, so we can rotate it like that. And then sometimes we'll go for quite a while without eating pasta.
Well, how many lives in your house?
Just my wife and I.
Huh?
Just my wife and
Well,
I.
we have a grandson and a son that lives with us, so there's 4 of us.
So you might want to package a little bigger.
And we eat that like, that lasts us one, if we go through that one box, like,
Right. I was gonna say, and if that's the case, you might want to package bigger and have bigger storage
we used to
containers.
have homeless people, we brought in homeless people for 30 years. Well, I don't know what you do when you have homeless people live with you.
And Ken, that's something else that I think we need to address is
How you, yeah.
mindset in an emergency, in a long-term emergency situation like that, where you've got to be able to have a powwow with everybody that you're responsible for and say, okay, one person cannot have all the food. We've got to distribute this evenly among everyone according to weight,
Well, I was gonna say, usually people, if you know what your eating habits are to start with, and that's a lot of it is trial and error, where you'll have to try things and see how it works. Because what works for me isn't going to work for you necessarily. Because that was a perfect question. How many people are there in your house? Right now, 2. But we know that we're going to plus up if anything were to happen, and we account for that in our preparedness. That we know that I'm going to end up with my son, my daughter, are going to come with. So we know that if anything happens, everything starts collapsing down, then we're all in one house. So, and then we prepare accordingly. And a lot of what we do is based on that, but at the same time, we rotate a lot of what we eat now. So, like I said, prep what you eat what you prep. That's the golden rule for food. If you don't like something, I mean, you can buy 100 cans of Spam. If you don't like Spam,
you're not going to eat it.
you're not going to eat it. Well,
Unless
you get hungry enough, you'll choke anything down. But on just a natural rotation, it's not going to be fun to eat something that you don't like. So
I got canned ham and it just went bad within 6 months.
I was gonna say,
Yeah,
I like canned hams, the small ones.
yeah,
We take 2 of those, chop them up, and use North American beans and make basically ham hocks and beans. Have a little bottle of smoked sauce, a couple shots of that inside there with it. It tastes like it's an actual ham hock, and I'm happy
yeah.
without having to track down a ham hock.
But what did I do wrong? Did I let it, I had it just in the can, so.
I was gonna say, might not have been a good can, because usually you should have about 2 to 3 years on most canned meats.
Well, that's what I was thinking, and I opened one up, and it was, I wouldn't have eaten it. It looked horrible, and I looked it up.
Now on, you go back to the Spam thing. Original Spam, I'm not a huge fan of. The new smoked Spam, I'm a bigger fan of.
Yeah.
And they've got like 4 or 5 different flavors. I tried the Walmart brand one time, and I mean, the dogs wouldn't even eat it.
Yeah.
It was horrible. It might have been how I prepared it though. But it was pretty rough.
Where would you find your other Spam at then? It's not Walmart, it's what you,
I was gonna say, now just their brand. Now the actual Spam brand, and I forget what they call it, some kind of canned meat or something like that. But there's a lot of different kinds of canned meats out there that you can go with for long term as well, that have a fairly good, that are fairly shelf stable. But for like rice, I mean, you can do all kinds of stuff with rice. I mean, you can put stuff over the top of it. The rice is, I mean, but once again, keep in mind, it's a base that you would lead a very miserable existence if you were going to try to live just off of.
I found dried vegetables at the mineral store. They got packages of dried vegetables and dried greens. I'm one that likes to
In
dry,
Newton?
so I would want something to throw in with my beans and rice and stuff. But my question is about they have a powdered bouillon there that lasts better than the regular bouillon. But bouillon lasts a long time because it's got so much salt in it. What do you think about the bouillon stuff?
I make my own. We have a dehydrator, and what I do is I'll dehydrate. I'll get
I'm dehydrating too, but that's an easy way to do it.
right, but here I'll double back on this just for a second. On the bouillon, we buy beef heart, we boil it, and then cut it up, dehydrate it, grind it up into a powder. But we have some other vegetables that we add to it as well. If you make it yourself, you can boost your protein significantly with it, like by using beef heart. I mean, a tablespoon of it in rice. It adds a ton of flavor on the top. But it also gets your proteins way up as well. And you know what's in it. It's a little more shelf stable once you have it powdered down. But we can give it to our dogs as well because we don't put anything in it that our dogs can't have. So we just use celery, carrots, and the heart. And then when we grind it all up, they can eat all of it. So we can give it to the dogs as well if we had to.
So you don't put
So you're
salt
saying
in
we
it?
can use
That's a good idea, because there's a lot of people that are on salt-free diets.
No, you don't have to put salt in it. I mean, and that's the nice thing about doing it yourself. And it doesn't take a long time to make. I mean, you can make a large if you have a dehydrator. You can do it in the oven as well. There's ways where you can put it on a tray in the oven. It's a little more awkward and time consuming.
I'm gonna have to learn how to do that because I don't like bouillon because of MSG.
Right.
Yeah.
And I was gonna say, and that's the thing where you start packaging some of your own stuff and doing some of your own, that it becomes, you know what's in it to start with. As long as you know what the source of the meat is. There's a place in Derby called Sig's. You can get some really good meat from them.
Can you get heart from places like that?
Yes, and heart's usually fairly inexpensive.
Heart, tongue, what all?
Right, but heart is extremely protein rich. So that was the potatoes. I push as much air out, and most of the time, in about 24 hours, they'll suck down, and I don't put them in a bucket, or I don't put the lid on the bucket until I see them start to draw in on themselves a little bit. Because then I know that the oxide absorber is working. Because I've had a couple instances where I'll seal the top, and I won't get a good seal, it'll have a little bit of a wrinkle in it, and it's letting air in, so it never actually seals down. So I wait about 24 hours. Once I see that everything's kind of collapsing in, then we go ahead and seal it.
So how many years have you been doing this?
Seriously, about 12. I originally started out as a 3%er. As I got a little bit older, I found out that I don't want to fight as much as I want to survive. I still am loosely affiliated with a couple 3% groups, more for training purposes than anything. I do medical training with them. That was my background in the military. So I'm able to.
See, my husband and I was in the cadet militia.
Right.
We was in a big one for many years. We got too old and they got broken up, and a lot of them died off and moved away and stuff. So we had to.
I was gonna say,
But we learned a lot of this stuff. Some of it, not all of it, because.
I was gonna say there's a very strong militia presence in Johnson County.
Nice. Nice. We gotta go and talk to him.
I was gonna say that seems to be where the biggest puddle is.
We need them back, we need, we need you guys to
I was gonna
get
say,
into it.
there's not a lot of activity on the 3% side in Sedgwick County.
No,
Uh,
not Sedgwick.
So that's kind of, but that's where, I was gonna say, that's how I started. And then as I kind of evolved, or actually as I've gotten a little bit older, and I started, and it's very, very telling that a lot of 3% guys are preppers, or they're in that mindset, but they're extremely, they're hyper patriotic. So that's not a bad thing. It's a very good thing. But they're driven more on that, fight tyranny path more so than the prepping side of it. But they do both, and you see that there every once in a while people will kind of peel off from that, and they do just more of the homesteading, prepping stuff along that line. So that. I've been about 10 or 12 years where I've seriously been on this side of it.
A lot of people are not gonna do this, millions of people will not do this. They're gonna be coming to our
Hey,
house.
have you visited with anybody in their 20s or teens, late teens that are?
Okay.
Yeah, my son knows a lot.
Remember how I was telling you that some of this.
He doesn't prep like that.
Almost got a PhD and I don't.
Okay, you see how much space there is at the top of this?
Yeah.
It's just way too much. So,
Yeah.
and we know that we're not going to reuse this Ziploc seal
Oh, and that's what you do? Why
So-
can't you just tape it to it?
because what I don't want the oxygen absorber to have to fight through that much more material. So that's 2 pounds of pasta.
Oh.
Okay, I want to tell you something.
So we'll get back in our
Now,
handy dandy
what do
little.
you think about that?
Oxygen.
How many young people are doing this, you know? Is there any young people doing this?
Yep.
Stuff?
Actually, they say that millennials are more fed up than anybody else.
The younger generation has to, it's what we have to, we rely on. We have to rely on the younger generation, like his age and stuff, and,
That's why we're here.
because we, like I said, if we had to take out, and we had to move, God says, all of us get together, and we have to move to a safe area, a lot of us couldn't walk, we couldn't walk out of here. You'd have to drag us in, they have to horse and pull.
So that was 2 pounds of
Pasta.
pasta. But like I said, I cut the bag down just so that the oxygen absorbers don't have to bite as much. But also, it makes it more manageable when I go to package without having that other piece rolled over on top of it. So we did. This one could have been cut down. The reason I didn't was just so you see how to do it, leaving the Ziploc intact. Really, you don't need to cut that down on this either. I could have done the exact same thing on this one, although I cut them down like this all the time, just because I know when I start packaging them, how many I'm going to get into a 5-gallon bucket. As we rotate even our long-term stuff, so that, some of it we do, some of it we don't. Sugar and stuff like that, it kind of sits the same place for long periods of time. Every once in a while we'll break into it because we'll be doing something and it's like, oh, we forgot to go to the store. Well, let's trot down and grab our own stuff from our own little store and we'll use it and then we just throw something back in. I don't know if anybody noticed, about 8 or 9 months ago, sugar all of a sudden disappeared for a minute.
Yes, I did. I saw it.
Well-
All the Walmarts you went to, the sugar bags was not there.
Yeah,
And
there was nothing.
They
out
had
there.
also started telling us every time you go to Walmart, buy a bag of flour.
Flour and sugar both.
Flour, salt. We have and there's different types of salt. So you also keep in mind we'll talk long-term storage on salt. Salt you can get regular, non-iodized, iodized, pickling, kosher.
Which is the best for you? Salt.
All of it is different and for different purposes.
Yeah.
Now
I would
we
buy
get a lot of iodine right now in just natural foods that we're eating. If we start eating out of our own gardens, 100%, we're not going to get that into our diet. There are green leafy vegetables I think that you can get it out of, or that it comes from. I believe I've heard before what you need to grow to get some of that stuff. The only thing with it doesn't go bad, but it can turn the salt yellow long term. So if you get into your salt and it's yellow, it's going to kind of look, it doesn't look quite as appetizing, but it is still good. Regular non-iodized, it lasts forever. Pickling salts. If you plan to do any canning, so if we get into any kind of situation that becomes long term, whatever it might be, and all of a sudden you think that you're going to have to live off your garden, or even if you just want to start being more self-sufficient or self-reliant and have gardens and be living out of your own garden, you're going to need pickling salt. Because if you grow, there's certain things that I grow that I just way overgrow, just because they're super, super simple. But that means I'm going to have to can them to get them to last me through the winter months. So that means pickling salt. So you're going to need to have some pickling salt as well. And salt, we're kind of unique where we're at because we do have ready access to salt within, how far away is Hutch? So there are large salt deposits here naturally. Other places not so much. But, I mean, and that's where the term, worth your weight in salt. Because at one time, salt was more valuable than gold because of what you needed to survive. But you use it in so many things on a daily basis. Most people don't even realize because we eat so much packaged or processed food that they just put it in there for us. So, and when you look at the back of it, and some people are, cautious enough to go, "Oh wow, look at all that sodium." Some people just take it for granted.
You have to take the salt when you buy the salt at the store, and they're in a little paper. You take the salt. Did you keep it? Do you have to take it out of there?
Salt and sugar can stay in its own containers.
In own containers.
If you put them into a mylar bucket, or into just a regular 5-gallon bucket, they'll last forever.
Set them in a bucket in their own thing.
Yep. And I want to say that you can get 8 pounds of salt in the round containers.
The sugar. Okay, the sugar is not in a round.
No, I was gonna say they come in.
The sugar usually comes in a bag.
Right, and it depends. Yeah. Yes.
I was just wondering, can just regular table salt be used for pickling?
Nope.
Why is that? What's the difference?
Honestly, I'm not sure.
Iodized.
Huh?
Iodized.
Well, I was gonna say you can get non-iodized table salt. I'm not 100% sure.
I heard that it has like an anti-caking
That's what
stuff
it is.
added to it, so that it stays
Table
granular.
salt or pickling?
The table salt, it has the stuff to keep it from clumping it, and that's what you don't want.
Also, when you mention iodized salt, now there's a lot of talk of great danger of nuclear exchange, nuclear war. And if so, I think that iodized salt will give you the iodine to protect you somewhat from the radiation, I would think.
Partially.
I was gonna say it's such a low amount.
But it's better than nothing.
Anything's better than that.
Yeah.
I agree with that 100%. Iodine, you need more of it and to have it in your system than what you can get from that quantity of salt. But once again, anything is better than nothing, like I said. But don't have have a false illusion that it's going to protect you long term from the effects of radiation.
Right. You trying to use this stuff up every year?
Not necessarily salt. Anything that'll last an eternity. Salt, sugar, any of your sugars. Like I said, as long as they're in glass, not so much. Some of it, no. My wife and I, we've just gotten kind of in the habit now of the once we had enough stuff put back, we started the rotation process. Then we can bring it forward. And it also gave us a way of being able to look at how we utilize what we have stored long term. And like I said, a lot of what I do works for us, and it's what we found over a number of years of just trial and error. So we know that doing 2 pounds of pasta works for us. You were saying that you eat 1 pound in a setting. You might want to do 4 pounds in a bag. and label them that way. And then when you pour it out, you have a bigger container if you're a big pasta eater or whatever. Sugar. We talked about sugar just for a second, but you can get it in 10, 5-pound, 25-pound bags. I found that the 5-pound bags store a little easier. I mean, you can get more of them into a bucket. So
4 pounds anymore. It's 4 pounds or something. The sugar thing, it used to be 5 pounds. It's 4 pounds now. They didn't use
shrinkflation. So there's some of it you have to kind of trial and error. You have to kind of step out and use it, or prepare it for long-term storage, and then get into it a little bit later on and see how that actually works for you. How you package it may be different than what I'm saying. I'm giving you a lot of rough information as it applies to myself and my family. Not that it is the end-all be-all, and that's the only way you can do it. Back to that. Eat when you prep when you eat. So whatever you're buying, you need to eat that stuff. Like I said, I'm a huge rice eater. They say you only need, on the grains, 400 pounds. I can eat 400 pounds of rice myself in a year, easily. But there's other grains that we get into as well. Oats. Oats is another big one that I like because oats is one of the superfoods. I mean, it has so much in it, and I eat it for breakfast all the time. So we put back a ton of oats as well, and oats are light though. So a pound of oats doesn't seem like much. I mean, it looks like a lot more than what it really is if you're looking at it pound-wise. But being one that, like I said, is a superfood. So we put back a lot of oats, potatoes, rice, corn, beans, all the typical stuff. But at the same time, we'll also rotate other canned foods as well that you almost have to have in the rotation with the other stuff.
Now, how on your oats? What do you put back? Steel oats, or do you do the old-fashioned oats?
Old-fashioned usually, and when you look at the oats,
put them in the bag.
how they, and a lot of that is preference, because some people like steel cut, some people like old-fashioned. But the difference I found out between old-fashioned and minute oats is they're cut one more time.
Yeah.
So that they just prepare faster. I like the old-fashioned oats better. I like that whole oat. I don't like it cut the second time, although I have 1 minute oats. We also put back what are called overnight oats, which are hard to find, but we mix them with yogurt and then let it set overnight.
I think Walmart now is carrying that because I saw it the other day and I thought,
Used to be the only place we could find them was on Facebook.
In one of those bags too. You'd have
Yes.
to,
Yeah, you can if you get a 2-pound thing of oats, and here's a little snippet of information. I'm gonna give all these a pitch real quick. If you go to Walmart or Dillon's to buy a 2-pound thing of oats, it's gonna cost you double what it is to get the exact same thing at Aldi's. And when you eat them, they take Aldi's. When you eat them, they taste exactly the same. There's no real big difference. So the other thing that this is kind of a little bit of a diversion from this type of long-term storage, but butter. Anybody in here like butter? Mm-hmm. I said butter and bacon. It makes the world go round.
I got the ghee in the jug.
You can can butter.
Yeah.
You can melt it down,
Yeah.
put it in mason jars, and can it, and it'll last about 5 years.
What now?
Butter.
Butter. Yeah, real butter.
I mean, the butter that you get, the real butter that you
sticks,
get in,
yeah.
You melt it down and put it in jars.
Without
See what it'll
refrigeration.
last you.
Yep, no refrigeration required.
And they will last.
Originally I bought Red Feather, which is a New Zealand company that basically does canned butter. That stuff has gone through the roof on cost. You used to be able to buy a case of it for about $125. It's up over $300 now, and the price is just continually going. Where you can go down to almost any store and buy either salted or unsalted butter, in 1-pound blocks. You melt it down, basically you cook it, you pour it into jars, you can it.
What's canning? What are you talking
How
about?
can, how do you
Canned foods? You ever can
No.
jam? Nope.
No.
You never can jam?
No.
Oh, well, then.
So I don't know what
What
you're
kind
talking
of
about.
candy is it?
Well, I mean, what, how do you,
It wouldn't be open kettle, so.
No, you have to use a pressure.
well, I
cooker.
mean,
Yeah, you have to pressure. You have to pressure can.
yeah, the pressure cooker does. After you put your butter in a jar, you have to pressure cook it.
Right.
Oh, if you don't have a pressure
Is
cooker.
it, how long?
Into mine.
5
How
years.
long?
There's a. You can't find any recipes for it.
Yeah, that's what I said.
I was gonna say there are none. I saw a thing one time that this girl had done where she was.
What, did it break the glass or something? The pressure cooker? No.
No, I mean pressure cook everything. I mean it's in a canning pressure cooker.
I don't even got pressure.
But I saw that. I took a ton of notes from where she was doing it, and I basically wrote down the process as she went through it. And we gave it a try, and sure enough, it works like a champ. So we can put back, I don't know.
How long do you pressure?
Yeah,
It depends. Well,
At what pressure?
I was gonna say I've got a recipe at home. I couldn't tell you just off the top of my head.
And there's a zillion YouTube videos.
Yes, there really are, and
Oh, I never thought about
there's
that.
more
Maybe I
and
can
more
find
of
that on
them
there.
now for butter and for meat. I was watching something the other day where, and if anybody's keeping up with any of the food stuff right now, with all of our distribution places burning to the ground and killing off tons of chicken with the supposed bird flu.
All these cattle that.
Yes.
My favorite was the 1,000 that died of heat stroke in
At the
10,000. It was 10,000.
out in,
10,000 at the
western
feedlot.
Kansas.
Yeah,
Oh,
10,000
Hugoton.
head.
All it was that they just all of a sudden decided they were
Yeah.
going
Yes,
to,
the
it's kind of like a union deal. Okay, we're not doing this anymore. We're just going to kill over and die. My wife's from Dodge. She said she never heard of such nonsense before that
well,
those cattle live up
they
there.
want us to eat bugs.
They want us to eat bugs.
Yes.
I was going to say, and I was going to say, there's places that are selling that stuff more and more now.
Oh, yeah.
But with the drought, and this is something to kind of keep in mind for long-term, short-term, mid-term food storage, is that if you follow the harvest, which we're coming into harvest season right now, and that our yields are way lower worldwide, so that means that cost of a lot of this stuff is going to start going up because it's a supply and demand type of deal. And then right now, the breadbasket of the world is under siege.
Yep.
So we have that issue. They're not letting anything out of there. They let some corn and stuff out for a while, but that's going to die off. Turkey said that they haven't talked about brokering any more of that. Anyway, so we have this whole nonsense going on worldwide with food. So if you have food and you're preparing your food for long-term storage, mid-term storage, short, whatever it may be, and you have to look at it that way too, that you have food that's short-term, mid-term, long-term. And you kind of have to figure that part out for yourself. But typically your short-term would be kind of what the FEMA says. And they've bumped, where FEMA used to talk about 3 days, they're now talking 2 weeks. They've come on board that, because you look at the law of threes. You can go 3 days without food. Why would you need to store food if your body can actually go 3 days without food? So, but they've all of a sudden started saying 2 weeks. And I was at Walmart the other day, and all of a sudden they're talking about be prepared. Buy now, because it's preparedness month.
New York is having PSAs about nuclear war, and you have to stay in your house.
So we have all this. There's all, and they talk more and more about food insecurities. People that don't have enough, you can't get enough. If you buy in bulk, it's less expensive. You just have to break it down. You don't have to buy small portions of stuff. You can buy larger, break it down, put it in 5-gallon buckets. Do whatever you need to do to make it more manageable for your personal use or your family use. But if you keep up with what's going on, and I really kind of urge everybody to keep up with what's going on, and not listen to just the media, but other sources that are on Rumble. That
does
you
the media
get,
people, you think the media people knows what's going on? Are they prepared? Do they
I
prepare
think
themselves?
that if you pay attention to what the people with a lot of money are doing, that is telling.
Yeah, they're driving
people
this.
with a lot of money are buying desert island, or they're buying islands, and they're building bunkers on those
Underground
islands.
bunkers,
They're stockpiling them. So they're buying property in New Zealand and building bunkers.
Yep.
They're doing all these things. So if they're doing that stuff, and they're not doing it just because they're eccentric. They're doing it because they think there's something else coming on. Bill Gates has bought up tons of water rights and land.
And farmland all around.
Farmland.
What is this? These people think they're gonna live forever?
No, but they think.
they're gonna die eventually anyway. So why are they
But
taking
so,
it away from us?
I was gonna say,
for?
but it's all corporate owned. It's not an individual. It's corporate owned. So the corporation is going to dictate water and food eventually.
Yeah, that's the point.
So
Not just that, but they're going to be going after housing next.
Yeah, they
They're
will.
gonna what?
They're going after housing next.
which they,
They're buying up housing because they're making it to where you have to get the worse and worse interest rates on properties. So now people are selling. They're selling to the corporations, and the corporations are going to buy everything up, and then you're.
What are they gonna do with the
nothing.
houses? What are
They're going to rent it
rent
out
it
to you.
they're going to rent it to you.
You own nothing and
You'll be happy.
In Prairie Village in Johnson County, they've got a diversity, equity, and inclusion board that's trying to rezone the city against the people's will and illegally. It's unlawful what they're doing, so that they can build more duplexes, triplexes, apartment
You
buildings.
see that going up? What
That's
about
not
that?
new.
The government does it too.
So the government's just trying to take everybody's property and then make you rent to live on it.
And never sell it back
Yeah,
to
for them.
anyone.
And they're trying to make you be able to pay even to breathe eventually.
Exactly.
Carbon tax.
Carbon tax. Exactly. Al Gore and his carbon tax.
They already got the thought police out there.
Yeah.
So as with the food storage is more than just mylar bags, buckets, beans, rice, and stuff like that. It goes a little deeper, and you have to, like I said, a lot of it has to be personalized to you and your families. This is the basics. I gave you a little bit about lids, buckets, and how to put it into those items. Taking that information and moving forward with it, you then tailor it to yourself and your families. Like I said, if somebody said, okay, supermarkets are all closed, you can't go to the store, how many of us would be able to confidently get up, walk out, get in our vehicle, and drive home without a real concern about it?
Where your food's going to come from.
And for what length of time would we be able to not worry about the food insecurity that other people would be facing immediately? And that's kind of where you have to put it into context. You don't want to put yourself into a situation where you need to fight the horde if all of a sudden food does become scarce or harder to get. Look at what happened during the onset of the pandemic. The stores were overrun.
Yes.
I mean, we got to see firsthand how panicky people can become,
Especially over toilet paper.
Yeah, the great toilet paper shortage.
I was gonna say, I have to admit, about 2 or 3 days before all that happened, I give my wife, love her to death, but I give her crap all the time about how much toilet paper she goes through. She goes, can you stop and grab some toilet paper? So as a joke, I went to Sam's and bought 2 of those huge bales of toilet paper, and I brought them home. I said, well, this should get you through the week. Well, about a week later, toilet paper was
Gone.
So we were all of a sudden sitting on a gold mine. But it was just all a joke. But it was like, that worked out pretty good.
I had to use washcloth.
I was gonna say, and
Get a bidet.
there's other things. I was gonna say,
Forget they have those choices.
and you can. Food is
We
but
didn't
one.
always have toilet, exactly.
I know it.
I was gonna say, food is but one item in
But wasn't the
our
food that was-
preparedness
Yeah, food was still there. It's probably-
that we need to consider. Like I said, and you have to look at it on a whole and as it applies to you. If you have a garden, great. If you don't, I would recommend starting one, or at least trying to figure out what it takes. If you have chickens, good. If you don't, you might want to get a couple. During the Depression, the U.S. government recommended that every family have 3 chickens.
Got it.
And I've got 5. I live like I said, smack dab in the middle of Wichita, and I have 5 chickens.
Yeah, but they're
And
not a rooster.
I had one for about a minute, and if anybody's interested, he was my wife's best friend. She used to pack him around the yard, and he would come running up to her to get picked up. But he got rehomed because we didn't want to eat him.
Right.
because he'd become a pet. But he did get rehomed. But no, you can't have a rooster.
No, you
But
can't in our town either.
but I was gonna say five hens, and they're young hens. When I say young, I mean they're probably 5-6 months old now, and we're getting 4 eggs a day out of them.
Wow.
Um,
And isn't that seasonal? I mean,
yes,
don't they have a
they
period
slow
of
down.
rest?
They slow down when it gets colder out. They don't lay as much, and it's just a weather thing. And it'll probably drop in by half, is what I've always been told. That you just don't get as many eggs out of them. But 4 eggs a day right now is pretty decent. We put back a little extra food for them so we can go a while without food, because if there's going to be a shortage of food for us, there'll probably be a shortage of food for them as well. Same with our pets, if you're looking at food for them. But these are things that you need to experiment with a little bit. I've got a postage stamp lot. I believe it's 50 feet across the front and like 80 to 100 deep. And I've got a 25 by 30 garage in the back. So I have no yard, almost zero. But I do manage to have a chicken pen, a little run for them. I've got a couple raised beds behind that. But all down the south side of our house, we garden in buckets. So we started bucket gardening just to see how that was going to work. We knew that we could grow peppers and tomatoes right off the bat. But you also have to keep in mind you need to be growing heirloom varieties.
Yes.
No, anything that says hybrid on it,
Nope.
no, bad, because you won't be able to get the seeds. That was something that we tried this year for the first time. We are actually harvesting seeds to see how that is going to work out.
See, I don't know how to do that.
Next year will be the tell on that one. But we already found out, we figured out that there's a couple varieties of tomatoes that do really well, a couple varieties of peppers that do really well. We can grow strawberries out the wazoo, but we're hoping that if push comes to shove, we do have our chickens, and we picked a breed of chicken that we can eat. Yes.
What's your opinion on growing mushrooms?
Pardon?
What's your opinion on growing mushrooms?
I love mushrooms. If you could grow them,
Yeah.
I would. Mushrooms are great, but we have a lot of morels in this area. If you like to go hunting mushrooms, there's quite a few if you like morel mushrooms.
I don't know what they look like.
They look like an elongated brain.
There's a poisonous
Yeah,
lookalike.
oh, I know it.
Pardon?
Sometimes I don't know.
In our yard, we have a type of wood that's beneficial for growing edible mushrooms.
Oh, really?
Yeah, some spruce.
Yes.
They grow.
So, I was gonna say, supposedly there's certain spots where they grow the best. But yeah, you can't find morels locally if you grow them. Growing stuff indoors there's certain things. Well, I haven't tried that. House isn't big enough to start that kind of nonsense. But we've tried to grow as much stuff as we can. The knowledge is every bit as important as as what comes from it. I know that if in this area with the soil that I've put together a couple times, that we have certain things that grow and they do very well. We found that we have other things that we've tried. I thought that the Cherokee tomatoes would do the purple Cherokees would do absolutely fabulous. Flop. That was like a train wreck on the tomato growing. But like I said, for your food, long term, it will only take you so far. You should only look at it as a vehicle to get you beyond a certain point where you have to become more self-reliant and be able to produce your own. Because otherwise, if you're thinking that you're going to have long-term storage that you're going to live off of indefinitely, then you have to have an indefinite supply of food. So it's only to get you out to where you can start growing, raising your own food, or to get you past a certain point, over a hump of a natural disaster, or man-made disaster, whatever that disaster may be, because there's different forms. I mean, when I talk to people, a lot of times I don't, if you don't want to be that tinfoil hat wearing crazy, you have to put it into terms that they can understand very quickly. Because if as soon as you push out and say, government, then they immediately put the blinders on. They don't want to hear anything else you have to say because you're a crazy conspiracy theorist. But if you put it into terms that they can understand very easily, you say, what would you do if a tornado decided to rip right through the middle of Wichita? I mean, and it hit our main power. It's going to be regional, but it's going to be tough for us because we're either going to have to go out beyond our ring, our comfort zone to find stores that are available that are going to have food, and you're going to have 500,000 people doing the exact same thing because nothing can come into this area. Another one that I like to use with people is we have a railroad that runs smack dab through the middle of Wichita. Do you think that they carry anything that's hazardous on that train?
Yeah.
Honestly, if you look at the signage on the side of their placard is hazardous material coming through. Have we ever heard of a train mishap in Wichita? Several.
Yeah.
I've only lived in Wichita 15 years, and there's been 2 in Wichita themselves. Nothing is derailed, and it's never been chemicals. But in the event that one of those trains were to derail, or there to be some other kind of incident, that there was a chemical spill where they, think you leave.
They had a truck that had a chemical spill right there on the highway, and they blocked the highway, so you cannot even.
So there's other things that if you put it into perspective for people and you give them something to think about, or ask them, what would happen if we didn't? Who remembers that Andy ice storm that we had like 15 years ago that shut the power off for
2004.
it shut the power off for what, a couple weeks?
Yeah.
Some people were without power. Stores don't open, nobody goes anywhere. You're pretty much homebound during that point.
In 1889, they had blizzards through here, and think about all the cattle and everything else that went
So
on.
I was gonna say, if you look at it, okay, well, if everything shuts down, then I have to be able to sustain myself on what I have inside for that time period. Now, if it's a couple weeks, okay, that's not that big a deal, but you plan that way, okay? I can plan for a natural disaster for several weeks that I have, and that's short term. That's your short term, planning. Midterm would be, anywhere from a couple weeks out to several months. If there's anything that falls into that, and disaster can be all of a sudden being without a job, not having income of some kind where you can go buy groceries is a disaster all in itself. If you have to get beyond that, or if you are going to help somebody else get beyond that sometimes, that goodwill thing goes a long ways. If you can help somebody else and you have that capability, you can help them. Then you have long-term, which most people consider long-term storage to be a year plus, or anywhere, 9 months, a year plus that. I highly, highly recommend, if you haven't ever looked through the LDS preparedness guide, to get a hold of a copy of it, download it. It's free online, and look it over. There's a ton of useful information. And
Do they show you how to can?
No, but they give you a lot of information on how you should be doing things, how many calories you should be, how much, what your caloric intake is. I mean, the LDS community, they're the original preppers.
What the LDS?
Latter-day Saints, Mormons.
Oh,
Yeah, I was gonna say the Mennonites are the same. Yeah, they're very similar.
Or the Amish. Amish do the same thing.
What's that website again? What is the website you were
It's just type in LDS preparedness on a search, and it'll pop up a ton of stuff. Like I said, real good information. U.S. Emergency Supply, they have some good information too, as far as what size oxygen the walrus use and what type of. It talks about mylar bag food storage. You get the big ones, the ones with Ziploc tops.
Supply.
Yeah, it's U.S. Emergency Supply. Okay, 1 gallon mylar. Food supplies. Okay, and if you look, wheat, flour, grains, and rice. 1 gallon mylar. It says you can do. It wants 500 cc's. Where if you're doing pasta, beans, lentils. It's just a little bit, 400 cc's.
The price of the mylar bag, the larger one,
The 1 gallons?
Is that as large as that?
No, you can get 5 gallon. I don't 5 gallon mylar bags. You can try them. I've put some stuff in 5 gallon mylar bags. It's a lot of work. It is a ton of work to use 5 gallon mylar bags, and you have the same effect as just going straight into the bucket. Because once you open it, you open it. So you're planning on using all of it, or you're going to have to throw another oxygen absorber in there and reseal it. Yes, sir.
You mentioned that we can buy buckets in several different places. Are the lids interchangeable
Yes.
with all the buckets?
They are.
Not necessarily. Not necessarily, because I bought, now it was, the supply chain problems were already starting. But I guess it was about the beginning of 21. And I went up to Menards and I bought their 5 gallon food grade buckets and their Gamma Seal lids, and they didn't fit each other.
They do make some short, squatty 5 gallons, and that is true. But if you get a standard 5 gallon, they make a shorter 5 gallon bigger round. And that is true. But you don't see those very much anymore. Most of the typical 5 gallon bucket that you get at Lowe's, Home Depot, Menards, Ace, they're all pretty standard on lid size.
Okay. Can I get the room's opinion on the those food saver vacuum sealers that you can get at Walmart? They have the plastic bags instead of the mylar bags.
It's a different process. It's sucking the air out, and you use it for meat storage. I love my food saver. That's another one of those things that where we quit wasting food. Freezer burn is probably the biggest culprit. If you're not canning meat, the next thing you have to worry about is freezer burn. If you take, say, a pack of chicken and you put it in the freezer, just in a styrofoam with plastic, it has moisture in it. And that moisture is immediately going to freeze and start to crystallize. So the shelf life on the chicken is dramatically reduced. You take the food saver bags and put it in, and they breathe, they outgas, and they also have a strip inside of them to collect moisture. And it sucks all the air out. And air is, once again, that's why you use the oxygen absorbers. Air is the biggest problem for long-term storage. And that's what you're trying to avoid. I bought my food saver. I bought it super inexpensive. I bought it at Walmart, and we do a lot of chicken. And if you buy bulk chicken, it's a heck of a lot less. You go to Sam's, Costco. If you can buy 17 pounds of chicken breasts or tenders, I mean, you're paying like right at $2 a pound versus the $9 a pound that the Dillon's was trying to charge not too long ago. So chicken's going up through the roof. But we found that we can get we know we can go at least a year, and with using the food saver, and not have anything freezer burn, taking it out, and it's still good. Like I said, we got ours at.
You mean the thing that you.
The sealer. Yeah, it's just basically it sucks all the air out, and you can seal up just about anything with it. If you're so inclined, you could do a whole gun and bullets.
I had a question about all of these. Everything has a expiration date on it now.
Don't. Expiration dates are okay. Some foods do have an expiration date, but so many of us have been
hoodwinked,
educated, led to believe that as soon as you see that date that you have to consume it or throw it away.
Yeah.
Not true. Sometimes it's a best buy date, which they're saying, whoever it is that's packaging it is saying it is best buy this day, where you're going to get the full nutritional value of that food and in its exact, texture that it was originally supposed to be in.
When you do cans, you can get a canny taste in vegetables that are left in there.
Yes. What? They're so edible.
And isn't a good rule of thumb is if it smells good, looks good, it tastes good.
I was gonna say, as long as the can's not bulging.
Right.
If the can's bulging, you probably want to throw it away. But yeah, a lot of it is best buy and not necessarily an expiration. There are some things that do have expiration dates on them, and those you can go past it a little bit. And keep in mind, some of that some of the expiration stuff only applies to, here's a perfect example, eggs. Eggs that you go to the store and buy, they're in the freezer section, they last how long? A couple weeks? 3, 4? Yeah, not very long. We don't wash ours. We put them on the counter and they'll last months.
Oh, and on the counter, you don't put them in the refrigerator?
Nope.
You can't freeze eggs too.
If you buy them from the
My
store, they
parents
have
had
to
it.
go in the refrigerator.
You can also.
But if they come from your own chickens and you don't wash them.
Yep.
Right, and don't
Yeah,
wash
that's
it.
right.
And we learned this summer how to glass.
Yes,
Huh?
that
Yeah,
is
you
absolutely
discovered what?
amazing. You can
What about
get
powder?
them to last 6 months
Where
to
do
a
you get
year.
powdered, where do
Easy.
you get powdered eggs
In
at?
what?
Huh?
Where do you get powdered eggs at?
Right now, I wouldn't even try. The cost of powdered eggs has gone through the roof. A number 10 can used to be what, 40 some bucks. Last time I checked, it's like $104
My God,
for powdered eggs. Powdered eggs, the price has gone
oh my God.
just, and they dropped back down for a minute and got it under 100. It was like back to 96, and then it shot back up over 100 again. But the price of powdered eggs has tripled. But a lot of that was due to the, I don't even know how many chickens they killed off due to bird flu, which affected that, which also drove the price of chicken up as well.
I did see something a while back about oiling the eggs. Putting oil on the outside of the eggs and they would let it for 5 months. I just barely saw it.
I haven't heard about that one. Glassing, I know what that
What's
is.
glassing?
You put it in water and
Pickling lime.
yeah, you put
We have some
potash
going
in
in
it.
our tornado shelter right now.
In the shell?
In these kind of buckets.
Yeah.
In
You
the
just
shell?
make sure
Or
that you
what?
get unwashed eggs from the chickens. And there are YouTube videos on how to glass.
Yeah.
But it's a mixture of pickling lime and water that you mix up, put them in your bucket, put them in a cool, cool storage space, and carefully put your eggs in there, and they're supposed to last up to a year.
Yep. That's a
I think the Chinese
that's
people
real.
make them last longer than that.
And another thing, Ken, before we close, that I wanted to add as far as the nuclear fallout went, you can buy Lugol's iodine and learn how to mix it up according to directions. And also buy seaweed. You can buy dehydrated seaweed, which is a natural source of iodine. It's not the tastiest stuff.
Oh, it's
But
horrid.
it's horrid, but if you want to live,
Yeah.
you'll eat it.
Might I suggest there are nascent iodine supplements that you can buy. They're called X2 nascent iodine or X3 nascent iodine. They're available at InfoWarsStore.com.
I know.
And
This is here for 20 years.
that would be an excellent source of iodine. Most people are deficient in iodine.
Yeah.
And,
It works great.
If you want to get some water filters or storable food that's already prepackaged to get you started before you start doing your own, because you do need a renewable source, just like you said, you can go to preparetoday.com, get all of the Ready Hour storable food. You can get Alexa Pure water filters. I highly recommend having Alexa Pure water filters and getting some storable food from there.
You like Alexa over Berkey?
Yes, I do like Alexa over Berkey.
do
Mike
the same
Adams.
thing for half the cost.
Do what?
Does the same thing
Berkey's
for half the
being
cost.
sued, by the
True,
way.
that's true. But Mike Adams, the health ranger, he did a test, like an industrial test, examining how much glyphosate can the different commercial filters filter out of the water, and the Alexa Pure could filter out 99.999% of glyphosate from water. Glyphosate is the hardest chemical to filter out of water, and that's why I recommend Alexa Pure, because it does everything the Berkey does, plus the most glyphosate out of your water. So that's what I recommend.
As we just pledged, Heavenly Father, we are one nation under you as Lord and Creator of all things. You are King of Kings, Lord of Lords. You are the one at whose name every knee shall bow and every tongue shall confess that you are Lord, to the glory of the Father. Father, we thank you so much that you lead us, that you guide us, and you protect us by the power of your Spirit. And Lord, we ask that you would go with each and every one of us now as we venture forth into our workplaces, into our social spaces. And Lord, that you would privilege us with being the light and the salt in the earth that you have ordained for us to be at this particular moment in time. It's no accident that we're here. It's no accident that the things that are transpiring right now are transpiring right now, because it's all in your will. It's all in your time. So thank you, Father, that you are ever with us. You'll never leave us. You'll never forsake us. We give you all praise, glory, and honor now and forever in the name of our Lord and Savior, Yeshua HaMashiach, Jesus the Christ. Amen and amen.
Amen. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, everybody.
Okay, Glenn, you had a question?
Richard, could I speak a couple minutes?
Most definitely.